Water. It is incredibly important to our daily lives. The water cycle is the path water takes as it travels from the ocean to the clouds to the land and back to the ocean. Let's take a closer look. Although the cycle has no beginning and no end, let's start with the ocean. About 96.5% of the world's water lives in the ocean. That's 1,338,000,000 cubic kilometers, or 321 million cubic miles. Warm air over the ocean provides the energy to break the bonds between water molecules, and they rise into the air as water vapor, a process known as evaporation. Evaporation from the ocean makes up 90% of the water vapor in the atmosphere. Water also evaporates from other bodies of water, such as lakes and streams. It can also transform to vapor through evapotranspiration. Say that 3 times fast. Basically, this is evaporation from the plants and the ground. Water is carried through the plants and released through small pores in their leaves. This doesn't sound like much, but a large oak tree can release 151,000 liters or 40,000 gallons into the air each year. Water can also enter the atmosphere through sublimation, although this accounts for much less. What is sublimation, you ask? It's the phenomena where ice and snow are transformed directly from a solid into a gas. It occurs in areas of extreme cold, with low humidity and lots of sunlight. High winds and low air pressure also contribute to it. The summit of Mount Everest is a prime example of these conditions. The warm air full of water vapor rises, but at higher elevations, the air pressure lowers, causing molecules to spread out and cool. The water molecules then join with each other to form small droplets, often around small particles in the air, such as dust. These droplets are anywhere between 10 microns wide to 1 millimeter wide. The droplets bunch together to form clouds, where they continue to collide and grow bigger. The collision and combining process that turns droplets into raindrops is called coalescence. It takes millions of droplets to form a single raindrop. Warm updrafts push the cloud up, so the raindrops have to get heavy enough that the fall velocity exceeds cloud updraft speeds. In layman's terms, this means that the water has to get heavy enough that the force of gravity pulling it down is more than the force of the wind pushing it up. When it finally falls, we call it precipitation. Now, rain isn't the only kind of precipitation. We also have snow, hail, sleet, and freezing rain. When raindrops fall through a layer of colder air close to the ground, they form either sleet or freezing rain. If the layer of cold air is thick, then the water freezes as it falls to earth and hits the ground as ice. If the layer of cold air is thin, the raindrops don't have time to freeze beforehand and so freeze on contact with the surface, forming a dangerous coating of ice. When snow is formed, extremely cold water droplets combine and freeze into a crystalline form. As the baby snowflake begins to fall, it passes through areas with slightly different atmospheric conditions. Droplets are added in different ways and shapes depending on the different conditions. Because all of the branches of the snowflake experience the same conditions at any one given time, each branch grows identically. Hail forms during storms. Water droplets are lifted by an updraft into colder air where they freeze. The storm pushes them back down where they partially melt before being pushed back up by another updraft. All this time they keep on running into and combining with other water droplets, accreting more and more layers of ice until they become too heavy for the updrafts to support them and the ice balls fall to earth. The precipitation falls into a watershed. This is also referred to as a drainage basin. What is this exactly? A watershed is an area in which all the water drains to a single exit. This exit is called the watershed outflow point, and the hills, ridges, and mountains that separate them are called drainage divides. Of course, not all the water that falls from the sky exits the watershed. Some of it soaks into the ground or is consumed by plants and animals. When the water sinks into the earth, it comes to rest in ground that is porous, with lots of spaces to hold water, surrounded by impermeable rocks. When the ground can hold no more water, we say that it is saturated. The area of ground that is absolutely full of water is known as a saturated zone, or aquifer. The top of this is the water table. The water in aquifers eventually reemerges as streams or is pumped up by wells for human use. Water can also be stored as glaciers, 90% of which are in Antarctica. The glaciers eventually melt and return to circulation in the form of streams. The water all runs downhill and eventually ends in the ocean, where the cycle just keeps on going and going and going. So, next time you drink a glass of water, think about all the amazing places those molecules have been. We'd like to give a shout out to our amazing nephews for recommending this topic. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to our channel.